In the summer of 1587, a ship dropped anchor off the coast of what is now North Carolina, and 115 men, women, and children stepped onto a strange, wooded shore, carrying with them the hopes of an entire kingdom, and within 3 years, every single one of them would vanish so completely that historians are still searching for their bones today. So tonight, settle in, dim the lights, and let's drift slowly into one of history's oldest and quietest mysteries, the disappearance of the Roanoke Colony, England's first attempt to build a permanent home in the New World, a home that would end not in war, not in fire, but in silence. The colony was led by a man named John White, an artist by training, a governor by circumstance. And among the settlers was his own daughter, pregnant, and soon to give birth to a baby girl named Virginia Dare, the first English child ever born on American soil. And for a brief moment, it must have felt like the beginning of something lasting. A small English village, rising quietly among the pines and marshes of Roanoke Island. But the land was not empty, and the relationship between the settlers and the neighboring Croatoan and Socotan peoples was already fraying long before the colonists arrived. Worn thin by an earlier expedition's violence, and the new settlers inherited a tension they did not fully understand, a debt of mistrust they had not personally created but would soon have to pay. Supplies ran low almost immediately, the promised support from England slower to arrive than anyone had hoped. And so, only weeks after his granddaughter's birth, John White made a difficult decision. He would sail back to England himself to plead for more provisions, more men, more time, and he left behind everyone he loved, his daughter, his granddaughter, and 113 others, with a simple plan. If anything happened, if they needed to leave, they would carve their destination into a tree or post. And if they left under distress, under attack, they would carve a cross above it. A small signal meant to travel across 3 years of silence, though no one could have known then just how long that silence would stretch. White expected to return within months, but England itself was suddenly at war, the Spanish Armada bearing down on English shores, and every available ship, including the one meant to carry supplies back to Roanoke, was seized for the defense of the homeland. And so month after month passed. Then year after year, White trapped an ocean away, unable to return to the family and colony he had left behind, and when he finally did secure passage back across the Atlantic, it was the year 1590, 3 long years after he had said goodbye. And when his ship finally reached the shores of Roanoke, what he found was not chaos, not signs of battle, not ash or blood, but something far stranger, nothing at all. The village dismantled, the houses gone, and the only clue left behind was a single word carved carefully into a wooden post. Croatoan, the name of a nearby island and its native inhabitants, and nearby, on a tree, the letters C-R-O, as if someone had begun carving a longer message and stopped. But crucially, there was no cross above either carving, no sign of the distress signal they had agreed upon, which meant by their own plan that whatever had happened, it had not been violent, or at least not violent in the way they had feared. White wanted desperately to sail the short distance to Croatoan Island to search for his family, but a storm was rolling in. His ship's crew was anxious to leave before the weather worsened, and the anchor cables were already fraying. And so, with the word carved in wood as his only answer, White was forced to turn back to England, and he would never set foot in the New World again, dying years later, having never learned what became of his daughter, his granddaughter, or the 90 men, 17 women, and 11 children he had left behind. In the centuries since, the story of Roanoke has settled into the American imagination as the lost colony, and theories have multiplied like vines across the ruins of what once stood there. Some believe the settlers simply relocated to Croatoan Island and were peacefully absorbed into the local community there, learning their language, adopting their customs, marrying into their families, and there is real evidence to support this. Early explorers decades later reported meeting people among the coastal tribes with gray eyes and lighter hair, and oral traditions among some native communities spoke of ancestors who were, in their words, born of men who wore clothes, while others believed the colonists tried to travel further inland, perhaps toward the Chesapeake Bay, seeking friendlier land and allies, only to be caught and killed by hostile tribes along the way. A theory supported by secondhand reports gathered years later by the Jamestown settlers, who heard rumors of a massacre from local sources, though nothing was ever confirmed, and still others point to disease, famine, or a hurricane. The simple, brutal indifference of nature capable of erasing a struggling colony without any human hand involved at all. And more recently, archaeologists digging on Hatteras Island, believed by many to be the historical Croatoan, have uncovered English artifacts, a gunflint, a rapier hilt, fragments of European ceramics buried alongside Native American tools and pottery, suggesting tantalizingly that perhaps the two peoples did not clash, but blended, that the lost colonists were never lost at all, simply absorbed, woven quietly into a different way of life, their English names and villages fading, but their descendants perhaps continuing on in a form no one thought to look for. And so the mystery remains formally unsolved. No mass grave has ever been found, no definitive trail of bodies or bones, no single conclusive answer carved anywhere for us to find. Only that one word, Croatoan, calm, deliberate, unhurried, a message left by people who, whatever their fate, appear to have had time to leave it, time to choose their next step rather than flee in terror. And perhaps that is the strangest comfort in this story, that in a place so often remembered only for its disappearance, the last trace anyone left behind was not a scream, but a word, quietly carved, patiently waiting more than 400 years for someone to understand what it meant. And maybe, in the end, we never will. And maybe that is all right, because some stories are not meant to end with an answer, only with a question we carry gently with us into the dark, into sleep, into our own quiet, wondering about the people who once stood exactly where we now stand, wondering about the ones who came after,